You can't make noise. I hate to inform you of that. That's a noise. Hey y'all, welcome back to the realm of Kidlit Comics. I am Ashley and we are here to do the best books of 2025. Now, do I have statistics for you? Absolutely not. Are we shocked? We should not be shocked. We should not be surprised. I have not updated my spreadsheet from Allie. Allie as in Allie from Hardback Hoarder. I feel like I always get that wrong. But at some point I will update that spreadsheet because it is a 5-year spreadsheet. But I do not have any statistics for you today. So unfortunately, we're just going into this and I'm just going to tell you about the best books that I read in 2025. Am I going to leave something out? Absolutely. Am I going to edit this video and then say, my God, how could I forget X, Y, and Z? Absolutely. But I did go through what I read and I think I kind of got this right. I'm going to divide it into age categories because that's typically how I do my wrap-ups, although I have not done a wrap-up since October. November and December were very interesting months for me. So while I do feel like I mean, I did read, but you know me, we're just going to leave those things in the past. So we're going to have a picture book category. We're going to have a middle grade category, young adult / teen category, graphic novel category, and adult category. You may notice that my typical children's section, which is usually books aimed at ages 6 to 9, is missing from this video because I don't felt like I read enough of a variety of variety of titles in order to give a best of best. I think I want to kind of broaden that this year. We'll see how the year goes. So I did decide to leave that out as a category. Now, the initial aim and goal was to give you a top 5 with 2 honorable mentions in each category. Then I got to my middle grade list and I said, oh, okay. Never mind, that ain't finna happen. I might as well go ahead and let that dream go. So we do start that way in picture book. By the time we get to middle grade, it ends up being a list of like 10 with 2 runner-ups. We get to YA and it's like 7 with 2 runner-ups. Graphic novels, I do follow the same trend. And then when I get to adult, I literally only have 4 and no runner-ups because while I did read adult materials last year, I did not end up reading a whole bunch that I enjoyed. So sad to say, but it is what it is. We're going to go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to try not to be too detailed about anything because this video has potential to be super, super long. And I just don't want that to happen. It's not that I can't talk that long. It's that I don't want to edit a video that long. So I ain't finna do it. All right, let's go. First category, picture book. The first book that we have is A History of We. This is a beautiful picture book that looks at the origins of all humankind. The artwork is absolutely beautiful. Mark my words, I do think that Nicholas will finally get his Caldecott debut, or he should at least get a Coretta Scott King Award. The time that this video is going to go up, the book awards will happen, I think, a week or 2 weeks later. I am hoping, like, I have my fingers crossed that he's got to get something this year. It's a beautiful, beautiful picture book. The second one we have is The Crane and the Keeper. This is an informational picture book. And if you're new to this channel, an informational picture book is essentially a nonfiction picture book. It is formatted the same way as a picture book, but we're getting nonfiction related materials. So this one focuses on a keeper that works with a crane in order to help her continue the process of producing. She builds attachment to this keeper and they build a relationship. It's very, very beautiful. It's one that I did end up featuring on my Instagram page. Number 3, we have Some of Us. This is a picture book about citizenship. I thought it was very, very well done. I think it's kind of a wonderful time to pick up this picture book. It's actually one that I want to revisit at some point this year. Then we have How Sweet the Sound by Kwame Alexander. Kwame always does a wonderful job with picture books. I feel like he's most well known for his middle grade and YA titles, but he's done some wonderful, outstanding picture books, and he always gets some of the best creators attached. This one, I don't know if I see it as a Caldecott, but I do feel like it could possibly get a Coretta Scott King Award. I don't know. I did a decent job calling the awards for 2025. I don't feel as strong with 2026, but this one is about the history of music in America, and I absolutely adored it. I think that Kwame always picks some very interesting pieces of American history and creates these beautifully illustrated works that connect well, I think, with both parents and educators and kids, and this is one that I highly recommend. The fifth one that I have on the list is Love in the Library. This is an older title. The rest of these all came out in 2025, but Love in the Library is one that I have been meaning to read for a long time, and I never picked it up, and I do believe it is a challenged and banned picture book. It follows the relationship between two individuals who meet in a Japanese internment camp, and she is the librarian and he visits the library, and they build this relationship. So it's a sweet love story while also highlighting the experience of what it was like for people to be in Japanese internment camps. I thought it was very, very well done, very, very relatable to what we're seeing right now, and is definitely one that I want to revisit in the future. This one had a dedication. It was a dedication and the author's note both that really, really stood out to me. Not just one, it was both. Because I remember I took a picture of it and then I put it on Instagram and people were asking me like, what is that book? And I was like, it's actually a picture book. I have two runner-ups or honorable mentions, however you want to view it. I have Paka Paka Column Papa, which is a biography about a man that was responsible for discovering different types of potatoes and preserving those different types, and it talks a lot about conservation. There's a lot of picture books coming out now that deal with conservation and how we will manage being able to feed or not feed the increasing global population. I thought that was well done. This one for me, I think could possibly be a Cyber, which is a nonfiction award that's given out for children's literature. I think it could possibly be a Pure Belpra. I don't think for Caldecott, but I do think it's a contender for one of those two. And then the last one that I have is Outside Mom, Inside Mom. This one for a plethora of different reasons, but I think the two that stood out to me the most is that how moms operate in the house and how they operate outside the house is two different things. And then also the story primarily focuses on a mom who speaks a different language at home and struggles to speak English outside of the home. And so her kid kind of becomes this in between, and knowing how much it's like difficult for her to communicate outside the house and how communication, like in comparison to how communication looks inside the house. I was not expecting that, because when you look at the cover, that's not what you think you're getting thematically, and it works really, really well. And I love that one because it surprised me so much. I like a good picture book that surprises me. Okay, on to middle grade. This is where I have to be careful because I will talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And I don't want to talk forever, but I read a lot of great middle grade this year. I was in my middle grade bag this year, as I was the year before, but I read some really, really great things, and two of them were series. So I have 10 titles here and two that are going to be my honorable mentions. So the first one that there's no way, because if you follow this channel at all in the past year, there was no way that I was going to make this list and this entire series was not going to be on it. Okay, so I decided to start my Warriors journey this year. Now, I read the first book in the Prophecy Begins series, Into the Wild, a couple of years ago, but I never continued with the series. This year I was like, I'm going to continue with the series because while I read the first book and I kind of have a feel for the story and I know how to recommend books based off of my experience reading the first book, I was like, I need to read the rest because I have to understand what the hype is. Y'all, holy crap. I have never seen more calculated characters, more vicious characters, more violent characters than these cats. And it's crazy because they're cats, but they're vicious. They are calculated, they plot against each other, and they're just really, really good. Every book ends on a cliffhanger, and I think that by the time I got to Forest of Secrets, which is the third book, I was hooked. I was sold. It was a done deal. So now I'm on this whole entire Warrior's journey where we are in the 8th or 9th story arc, and every story arc contains 6 books, and then you have super editions, and then you have graphic novels, and then it's just a bunch of spin-offs and things in between. There's novellas, but it's a really great series. I actually was buddy reading these with Ray, and we were supposed to pick back up in November, but I really wasn't reading in November. So the books that I read in the series that are part of arc 1 include Into the Wild. We have Fire and Ice. The third book is Forest of Secrets. The fourth book is Rising Storm. Fifth book is A Dangerous Path. And then book 6 is The Darkest Hour. They're all fantastic. If you like talking animals, if you have a kiddo that likes Wings of Fire, they're going to love Warriors. I think those two have essentially become interchangeable with each other in terms of recommendations. But if you were ever hesitant to read the Warrior series, I will say it is a big commitment. But if you were hesitant, here's your sign that you need to read the books. The next series, quote unquote, that I need to read, I have to find, to be honest with y'all, I don't know where my first book is, and it's stressing me out. It's somewhere in here, but I took it to Y'all Fest, and then I don't know where I put that bag from Y'all Fest, so I need to find it. But for Meet Me in the Middle book club, which don't worry, we're going to talk about why Meet Me in the Middle comic book club, all that stuff is going to come back this year. I just need to sort some things out, figure some things out, and I probably will have those videos coming out at some point within the next week or so. But for Meet Me in the Middle, our first quarter, we did a theme called Here Be Dragons, and we read 3 books that had dragons in them. One of those books that had a dragon in it was The Last Dragon on Mars, and then I also ended up reading the sequel, Rise of Neptune. This is one of the best middle grade dragon books that I think I have ever encountered. And that's after me reading Wings of Fire, which is a well-known, well-loved dragon middle grade series. Let me tell you something. This series is really good. I think that while Wings of Fire is good for like 8 to 12, I think that and this is not the name of the series, the Dragon Ship series is the name of the series. These are good for like 10 to 14. So that's that weird age group that I always say I have struggles recommending books, because either you're in middle grade or you're high up in teen, and that bracket of kids often gets left out of the mix. I think we're starting to see a little bit more come out for them, and this is a series that I think solidly fits within that age range. It is a sci fantasy, which I don't think I've had much experience reading, which is a combination of sci-fi and fantasy. We are following a main character by the name of Lunar, who is on Mars. And Mars is a hostile planet. So each planet, every star, every moon is attached to a dragon. And these dragons are based off of Greek mythology. So it's got everything that I love all in the mix. The premise of the story is that the dragon that was associated with Earth, which is Gia, willingly gave her life so that humans could inhabit Earth. Well, humans got greedy, and they thought that if they went to Mars and they attacked Ares and killed him, then they could inhabit the planet Mars. Unfortunately, Ares was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. Cursed the entire planet. And so when humans did end up going to Mars, everything attacks them. If they bring animals from Earth to Mars, the animals for some reason start to attack them. Anything that was on the planet prior to their arrival tries to attack them. And so they're trying to figure out a way to make Mars more sustainable. There is, when I tell you the amount of twists and turns in this, because Lunar ends up connecting with some people that are part of a secret mission. I won't say what that mission is. He ends up connecting with a dragon, and they have this bond, and there's a reason why they have this bond. And it just kind of is twist after twist after twist after twist. When I finished The Last Dragon on Mars, I was so upset that I did not have this book which is The Rise of Neptune. And granted, I only had to wait, because I read that at the beginning of the year, I only had to wait until October to get this book. I don't think we're going to get another book in this series possibly until next year. And I'm very disappointed about that, because when I tell you I desperately need the third book because of the conclusion to this, I don't trust anybody. That's all I have to say. You don't trust anybody. You don't have faith in anybody. You just kind of move through the story. But it is a good balance of sci-fi and fantasy, one that I highly recommend, and one of my favorites for 2025. I'm sure the next book will end up being on my favorites list as well. Number 3 on my list is The Undead Fox of Deadwood Forest. Mark my words, this will either get a cat. No, this, I don't know if it will get the Newbery, but it will at least get a Newbery honor. And if it doesn't, I throw the whole thing away, because The Undead Fox of Deadwood Forest is one of the most brilliantly written books for a middle grade audience that I read in 2025. I did not think that I was going to enjoy this book. It definitely felt like one of those one-offs, like, oh, okay, I'm just going to read it. I know that Aubrey had written a book in 2024 that I had meant to read. It didn't get to it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to pick this one up. Such a fascinating book that tackles themes of grief, identity, regret, and written in a way that I think is very accessible to that age, but also written in a way that adults can enjoy it. It's just really, really good balance. The writing is just superb. We're following a fox that lives in Deadwood Forest, and his job essentially is to help creatures determine where they're going to go in the afterlife. They have 4 options. What those 4 options are, I cannot remember off the top of my head, because it's been a while since I read this book. But he encounters a badger, and the 2 of them do not get along. She's very sweet, but he's just kind of like irritated by her existence. And he sends her off, and then all of a sudden she pops back up, because how the world works is that if he sends a animal into the wrong area, they keep walking until they eventually end up back with him, and he has to start their process all over again. So they can't figure out where she's supposed to go. And there's also kind of like this prophecy hanging in the air that someone is going to take over his role. And then they decide that they're going to go on this journey and figure out exactly what's happening, what this prophecy means. When I tell you that fox damn near had me in tears, there was a specific moment, and it's not a spoiler, where I felt like, oh my gosh, like I know this feeling all too well, where you have held everything together for so long that the smallest thing just makes everything collapse, and you finally have that breakdown that you need to have. And it was such a small moment where his garden was ruined by humans, and he had kept all of his pain and anguish together so well that that one thing triggered this dam to completely collapse. And he has this entire breakdown with all of these emotions that he's been holding in that he needed to feel. And I just, I can't explain, like the narration, because I listened to this one audio, the narration was superb. The reveal at the end damn near broke me. I don't cry very often when I'm reading books, but when I tell you this one almost took me out. It was really, really good. So if you have not had the chance to read The Undead Fox of Deadwood Forest, a 10 out of 10, like highly, highly, highly recommend. If I had to pick some of my top books, like if I had to go a top 5 over all age categories, The Undead Fox of Deadwood Forest would definitely be up there. The next one that I have on this list is All the Blues in the Sky. This is another one that I think is a Coretta Scott King potential and also a Newbery potential. I just, Renee Watson is probably one of my favorite authors, not because I met her and I think that she just has this beautiful light about her. I felt very calm and very peaceful when I was in her presence. It's kind of hard to explain, but she was wonderful. I met her a couple years back now, but her writing is just so, so good. All the Blues in the Sky is another one that I think fits perfectly for that 10 to 14 audience. More so than what I expected it to, because when I was reading reviews and it said 10 to 14, I was like, okay. Read the book and I was like, okay, I see why. So we are following a main character who loses her best friend. I also, let me just go ahead and preface this. A lot of my favorite books in the middle grade category are very depressing. We know I love a good sad girl book, so it is what it is here. But she loses her best friend, and it is about her exploration of her grief. So she's in a grief group, and one of the things that stood out to me the most that I don't know how to explain it, but other than the fact that she says that she gets frustrated, she's angry, and kind of over being in the grief group because everyone in the grief group had time to say what they needed to say to their loved ones, right? It was expected. The death of her best friend was not. And in some ways, she holds herself responsible for the death of her best friend. And then you understand why as the story unfolds. And there is a specific, and I don't want to say it because I do feel like it's a spoiler, because you don't catch it until the main character points it out. And then you think about it, about how the book is written, and you're like, holy crap, like I didn't even notice that. There's something that she says very specifically at the end related to her best friend. And when I tell you, I was like, oh my God. Now this one did kind of have me breaking down at my desk. I was literally in the middle of processing a book and I just stopped. And I was like, I can't, because this book is really, really sad. And the author's note did not make it any more easy, because the dedication, I believe, says to anyone who's lost someone and to everyone who will. And it's supposed to be this idea that grief is the one thing that unites us all. It's something that we all will experience at some point. And I think there was a quote in there too that talks about the fact that like grief can be like hunger, like you can ease it, but it never truly, like it doesn't ever go away. Like once it's there to stay, and you have to learn how to make space in your body for it. And that can be really difficult. What I did not know is that when Renee wrote this book, in between the time that the pandemic started and even when I met her, she had lost 22 people in between 2020 and this book being published in 2025. 22 people. And it's amazing how people can operate and move in their grief, because when I tell you, when I met, you would never know that she was in the process of losing so much in such a short period of time. Love her, love this book. I would have tissues with you. This is another one that I think if I had to pick a top 5, it definitely would be in that category of top 5. Is 5 on the list is And Then Boom. Also depressing. It's so depressing. Holy crap. When you look at the cover of this book, it's not what you think. It's so animated. It doesn't look like what it is. And now I've heard from the streets that that's how Lisa Phipps moves with her covers, and never mirror exactly what she's feeling or what she's talking about in her books. In this one, we are following a main character. It's a young boy who has a mother who gets what he calls the itch. When she gets the itch, she disappears and just is not in contact, does not take care of him, nothing. So his grandmother steps in and she decides to raise him. They are then impacted by some financial stress. She loses her job, and then they end up in a situation where I don't even know how to get into the details. They end up in a situation where they're homeless at one point, but then he loses his grandmother, and it gets worse. There was a scene specifically in this book that I don't think I've ever had a middle grade book give me such a visceral reaction. And it was a scene in which he had spent time alone, because he ends up living in the house by himself. There's no one there, and he has no access to food, and he does something in order to sustain himself. And I was heartbroken and sickened to my stomach, like at the same time. And I don't know how to describe like what that feeling is, but I think Lisa Phipps, in writing this book, wanted to illustrate how home insecurity impacts kids, and sometimes you have no idea that it's even happening, and that kids can strategically attempt to hide it, and you will have no idea that that's even going on. Because there was even one scene that I thought was like really, really heartfelt, where he could not, of course, because he's in school, he's not paying for any bills until the water gets shut off, and he has no access to bathe, and his two closest friends decide to wash the cars, and they start throwing soap and water at each other. And it kind of is this unspoken thing, like, we're going to help you shower without offering you our shower, so we don't offend you and we don't make you feel any worse than you already do. And I was like, oh my God. That was another one where I was like, the emotions in it, it was a lot. It was a lot, but it was so good. Lisa Phipps, I think for me, is going to be one of those authors that I know when she writes, I'm going to have to go in with a lot of caution. I have to be very, very careful whenever I'm reading her stuff, because I feel like she's going to touch on dark themes, topics, subjects, and I have to mentally prepare myself for it. The next one that we have is okay, I promise you, 7 and 8 are not. They're not as dark. Number 6, Please Pay Attention. This is Jamie Sumner's new one. I think Jamie actually wrote 2 books in 2025. This is one of the 2 that I was able to read last year. And Please Pay Attention focuses on a main character that is a wheelchair user. I think she has cerebral palsy. I cannot remember off the top of my head. She is adopted by someone who works at her school, and this book is about a school shooting. So the book is told in 3 sections, where it's before the shooting, during the shooting, and then post the shooting during her recovery. I am so highly disappointed that I can literally craft a book list about, like, with teen and middle grade books that tackle the topic of school shootings. That shouldn't even be a thing. That is becoming a common theme in youth-based literature, but it is. And I will say this book was done with a lot of thought, love, care, compassion, consideration, because the author lost her friend in a school shooting. And so a lot of the emotions that she's able to convey on page are emotions that she's experienced herself. And I think that when we talk about school shootings, we talk about the kids that unfortunately die during school shootings, and we don't talk about the kids that survive and the PTSD that comes with that. And so we see that with the main character, where she can't hear loud noises anymore, like anything like fireworks. It automatically is a trigger for her. How it feels to go back into school post a school shooting, and how being in that space and noticing that people are missing, teachers are missing, kids are missing, and having to continue the school year knowing what has happened. Like, that's stuff that I think here in the States, like, that's information that we just don't think about. And we're thinking about the right things, right? Like, no more thoughts and prayers. Like, things should be changed. Like, kids should be going to school to learn. Like, it shouldn't be, I don't want a pair of light up shoes because if someone comes into my school with a gun, they're going to know where I'm at. Like, that's something that I was told by another parent that their child told them. Like, that shouldn't be things that our kids worry about. And those are conversations that are happening that are super important. But the conversations that don't happen as frequently is what happens to these kids that make it through. How many of these kids have died by suicide because of the PTSD that comes from a school shooting? And so Jamie did such a beautiful job writing it. And I think that it's done very tactfully and in a way that I think is appropriate for ages 8 to 12. And I know that's crazy to say, like, oh, it's about a school shooting. All right, so not sure where that cut off, but either way, I do think that the way that Jamie did it, it does lead to conversations that can happen between parents, caregivers, schools administrators, community members, and youth. So I definitely recommend that one. But just be mindful that the school shooting scene does happen on page. It's not a fade to black. She does it in a way that it's not explicit, but you are aware of what is happening in real time from the main character's perspective. All right, moving on from something that's not dark. We have Not If I Break Up With You First. Another thing that I'm seeing in trends for publishing for middle grade readers are like tween romances, which is great. Not that tween romances didn't exist, but I'm starting to see more, and I love to see it because I don't want those babies reading Colleen Hoover. Those babies should not be reading dark romance. They need to be reading this because this is really, really cute. It follows two characters. I can't remember if they're in seventh or no, they're in eighth grade. I was like, they're either in seventh or eighth grade. And there's dual perspectives. So we have our hero, heroine, and they've been friends for a very, very long time. But they're in that phase where like kids start pairing off. And then you always have other kids who are like, I don't understand like what's going on. I don't want to pair off. I'm not interested in dating. And they are kind of forced into being a couple because she wants to go to the dance with him, not as a boyfriend, just like, oh, this is my best friend, we want to go to the dance. But then all their friends are like, oh, so you're together, so that's your boyfriend. And they're kind of like, okay, I guess. This is a cute kind of play on How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, if you've ever seen that movie. So the two of them don't want to be together. And then they start strategically figuring out ways to annoy the other so that that other person breaks up with them first. And it's cute, it's funny, it's charming. I had such a good time with this book. I am 34 years old. And I thought that this was the sweetest, cutest, contemporary little romance for tweens. It is age appropriate. It is very specific to that time period in their life. And I think that G.F. Miller, she knew what she was doing with this. Like, this is very, very well done. This is one that I would actively pass out if I had kids in between 10 to 14 saying like, I want romance, but the romance that's typically done for teens is a little too much. I want something that doesn't have any like, I hate using steam spot because it's not what I'm going for here, but more so something that's on their age level. And it has a really cute and sweet conclusion to it. This is one of my favorites that I read because I read a couple of tween romances in 2025, but this is one of my favorites that I read. And G.F. Miller has another one that she wrote in 2025. This one came out in 2024, but she had another one released last year that I do want to read that I think is going to be well worth it. It was a fun time. The next one that I have is also not dark, but it is a middle grade fantasy, and it's Tristan Strong Destroys the World by Kwame Mbalie. So I read Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky before. Of course I read it before because it's book 2, but it was a few months in between me reading them. I like Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky, but let me tell you, Kwame did his thing with this one because I felt like the story really, really came together. This is another series that does a good job exploring grief because we have another main character that loses his best friend, but the mythology behind it is really, really great. So in the first book, we get a lot of Black American mythology with some ties to West African mythology. This starts to explore all of the African diaspora and ties all of it together, which I was not expecting. But when I saw Mami Wata hit the page, I said, oh no, not the Caribbean. It was great. I loved it. I can't really say much about it because it is the second book in the series. But if you haven't started Tristan Strong, I highly recommend it. If it means only getting to this book, because this book was absolutely fantastic. Okay, we're going back to depressing. Bear with me, but I really like this book too, and that's Dear Run Home. This was a 2024 release. I've read this author before. This is a deaf author who primarily writes books about main characters who are deaf or hard of hearing. The series that she had before this book is historical fiction that follows a deaf community in like, it's either the 17 or 1800s. Don't quote me. It's one of the two. And this one is more of a contemporary book. We're following a main character, unfortunately, that lives in a household where she is deaf and her father refuses to learn sign language. And it is a hot mess. The amount of neglect and abuse in this book I would check the content warnings for this one, because there's a bit, some of it not so much on page, but reference to. And there is a great author's note that gives some statistical information about how detrimental it is to deaf and hard of hearing children who are born to hearing parents or in hearing households where they refuse to learn sign language, and how that impacts them, not only in terms of being able to communicate, but also impacts them in terms of how they view themselves. I think this one was another one that was really, really well done. Hard to read, but written in verse, quick read, and one that just left an impression on me. Number 10 that we have on this list before we hit our runners up. Is it runners up or our runner ups or honorable mentions? We're just going to go with that. I have the Track series by Jason Reynolds. Y'all know that Jason is Jason was going to be my husband, but not anymore. But I love Jason a lot. He is such a talented writer. I met Jason back in early 2020 because it was right before shutdown. I met Jason for the first and probably the last time. But I decided that I was going to reread the Track series because Coach came out October of last year. Have I read Coach yet? No, I haven't. But this is a 5-star series. I loved it. The first time that I read this, though, I only read book 1 and 2, which was Ghost and Patina. And I was like, I'm going to reread Ghost and Patina so I can pick up Sunny and Lou. And I did. So, like I said, book 1 is Ghost. We have Patina, Sunny, and then Lou. And these books each follow a main character, and all of the characters are on the same track team. And they all have different things going on in their life that impacts how they view each other, how they view themselves, and how they view their participation on the track team. Of course, Coach is going to be the book in which we learn more about Coach. And I heard that it's good insight to how he behaves when we first meet him, when we see him in Ghost. So I'm excited to read Coach. I'm glad I reread it. I need to read Coach soon because I don't want to forget everything that I picked up from these 4. These are also really, really great on audio, quick reads, and just absolutely wonderful. I think that one thing about Jason is that none of these characters read anything alike. And that is the marksmanship of an author that is very, very skilled, because there are authors that I know that write multiple characters that kind of are in connected series and they don't have distinguished voices. You're not going to find that in this. Every single one of them, they read very, very differently. The 2 books that I would consider to be my honorable mentions are going to be History Smashers by Kate Messner. History Smashers is one of the best ways to introduce 8 to 12-year-olds to nonfiction in a way that's digestible and interesting, accessible, multi-format, and I think they're on like book 13. I think book 14 comes out this year. Which one did I read this year? I think I read the Mayflower one. Hilarious, let me tell you, because the fact that we even have the audacity to celebrate Thanksgiving kills me every single year. So what Kate does is she takes major historical events. I think the last one I read was Plagues, Diseases, and Epidemics. That book was so good. Oh my God. I've never been more interested in diseases than when I read the book. It was super well done. But what she does is she takes those events and she tells you what we have been taught historically. And then she'll be like, actually, no, that's not the truth. And here are the actual, she'll copy sections from actual documents, historical documents, so that you can get a firsthand experience on what actually happened. And I think that the history of the Mayflower, in 1620, what happened during the first Thanksgiving has been so misconstrued that it's fascinating when you learn exactly what happened and how we have a turkey and pie, and they were eating things like eels. Okay. There was no turkey. It was nasty behind food that they were eating during that point. And even corn, the way we eat corn now is not the way that corn would have appeared in the 1600s. It's just really good. I highly recommend the series. I do plan to finish the series myself at some point. But if you have a nonfiction kiddo, or you have a struggling reader that's interested in nonfiction, I think these are like some of the most accessible nonfiction books that I have ever read in my life. And I'm saying that as an adult, one, and two, as someone who has their bachelor's degree in history. The second one that I have is another one that I'm shocked. I decided to read The Power of Parasites. Don't know why. That book was so good. I can't remember what made me pick it up. I think maybe I was processing something and I saw the book and I was like, I'm actually going to read that. It is a book literally on parasites. And I learned a lot about parasites in ways that I did not think I wanted to know information about parasites. I learned about how parasites impact different animals, like completely. Like you could have a parasite in one animal and it does nothing, and a parasite in another animal and it tears them up from limb to limb. How we have parasites in us is quite disgusting. I don't like to think about it. But it was a very fascinating book that made me itch and squirm, and I appreciated the way that it was written, because also another super accessible middle grade nonfiction book. I've been trying to explore middle grade nonfiction more because I think that that is a harder area to also recommend in, because we're seeing differences in literacy right now, and I want to be able to recommend things that are like super accessible but jam-packed full of like great information at the same time, but done in a way that I can give a kid this book and be like, you'll enjoy this. Like, it's not like reading a textbook. That's what I'm looking for. I think a lot of nonfiction in the past was very textbooky, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that kids were using a lot of books from the library for research. Now they have a lot of databases and online resources that they can use, and so you have to be a little bit more creative with your middle grade nonfiction out. And I think that both History Smashers and Power to the Parasites, excellent. You can't go wrong with either one of those. All right, so battery died, but we are going to jump right back into it with our young adult section. The first one that we have is Pretty Girl County. This is by Lakita Wilson. I met Lakita at ELFest this year. She was absolutely wonderful. I did not know what to expect from this book, but it is absolutely fantastic, well written, just one that I literally could not put down. It follows two main characters who used to be best friends. And one of the friends, her mom gets put on this reality TV show that's kind of like Real Housewives, and they end up getting more money. They move to a more affluent part of town, and we have some issues between the two friends. At the same time, we are looking at their struggles with navigating like post secondary plans, shall I say, like post high school plans going into college. There are some relationship dynamics. I just saw that this was really, really fun. If you like Elise Bryant, or if you're a fan of Joya Goffney, this is one that you will really, really end up enjoying. The second one that we have is Audrey and Bash Are Just Friends. This is by Tia Williams, which Tia Williams is definitely more well known for her adult stuff, but she released her first YA book and it was very, very well done. This follows the daughter of the main characters from 7 Days in June. Now, if you remember, I did not like 7 Days in June. It was just not my cup of tea. It wasn't for me, but you don't have to read 7 Days in June in order to pick up this book. It is about their daughter, and she is the one person that everybody goes to for advice. And so she decides that she's going to publish this book, and to help make herself more competitive in terms of her like college applications, and she ends up trying to get help from Bash. And of course, it is naturally kind of their love story. Tia Williams did a wonderful job with this. The same way that I've just described, like Elise Bryant, Lakita Wilson, Joya Goffney. This is one of those contemporary teen romances that tackles tough topics that are really, really relevant to that age group, but also has this light and warm romance about it that I really, really appreciate. And a lot of people are not huge fans in terms of like bookish creators are not fans of YA contemporary romance, but I am, because once again, I think it's true to the experience of the age group. I can understand why it doesn't appeal to adults, but it is great for teens who want that element within their books. The next one that I have, we're diving right into the dark stuff now. Those were your 2 light books. The next one that I have is Red. This book has such an interesting place in my catalog of favorites that I've read. I actually originally had this book checked out from the library, and I remember I told my daughter, I said, just look around the room. Because I was taking a bath at the time. I said, look around the room, pick any book that looks interesting to you and give it to me and I'll read it. And I ended up getting Red from her. She found it on my desk and she's like, here, read this one. I did not know what to expect from this book. It is a light retelling of the Scarlet Letter, which is why if you can look closely on her t-shirt, she has the letter A spray painted, if I could talk, on her white t-shirt. So it follows the main character who ends up in a situation where she is pregnant. She will not tell her mother who the father of the child is, but she does tell her mother that she is pregnant, and her mother tells her that it's her decision on what she wants to do. She's a part of this youth group, and she finds solace in this youth group, and she makes a decision about what she's going to do about her pregnancy. It gets to the youth group, and the entire youth group and the church turn on her. And so it is her grappling with how something that felt like community for her ended up being something so negative, and it makes her begin to question her own faith. There were a couple of books that I read this year that talked about the impact of religious communities on teens, and how negative experiences really shape how we view religion sometimes, and how it feels to have a sense of community, and then that community turns on you when you make a decision that they don't necessarily agree with. I think that this was a great conversation about bodily autonomy. This was also a great conversation about I don't want to say what it, I'm going to retract that, because if I tell you what else I think it's a great conversation about, it's a spoiler, because eventually you find out who actually got her pregnant, and it becomes a deeper conversation about things that often get overlooked because of the community that they're attached to. And that's all that I'm going to say. I have never read an Annie Carty book before. I don't remember whether this is her debut or not. I don't think it is, but I will be checking out other things by her. This was one that I wish would have gotten a little bit more attention, and unfortunately it just didn't. Time for another wonderfully depressing book, and that is The Glass Girl by Kathleen Glasgow. I met Kathleen last year for a conference that I went to, and I told her that this was the first book that I ever read by her. I bought another book that was by her, and I did not know if I was going to ever be able to read something by her again. This is the second or third book that I've read that has dealt with addiction in teens. And once again, this is another book list that I think I can make that I don't like that I can make it, but I think that it is great that teens have access to books like this, especially when their age group, they do have people who battle addiction. The first book that I read about alcoholism was Thirsty by Jazz Hammonds. I think that was the first one. And so this, I believe, is the second one. So in this one, we're following a 15-year-old main character who you don't realize, no one realizes at first that she is battling alcoholism because she drinks socially. She drinks around her friends, and everyone is drinking. It's only when something happens that everyone is kind of clued into her struggles, and she is sent to rehab. And what I think I appreciated about this book is that it's not a story where it's like, oh, I went to rehab and everything was perfect. She went to rehab, relapse, she gets out, she relapses. And it shows what happens when someone who is battling addiction has no support system or doesn't have an adequate support system, or the people who should be supporting them are not doing it. I think this was hard to read as a mom. This was hard to read as a mom rooting for a fictional kid to make a breakthrough when I knew in my heart of hearts that they were not going to be able to do that. I think the way that this ended very much so reminded me of Heroine by Mindy McGinnis, which I need to buy that book for my collection, because anytime I talk about teen books that deal with addiction or substance abuse, like, that is always on my top, because we have a main character that deals with addiction to heroin. And that book does not wrap up neatly. This book is the same. It does not have a neat bow. Oh my gosh, we overcame. It is, hey, I'm still an alcoholic. Hey, I have a parent that decided to have beer in the house when I just literally got out of rehab. It was very tactfully done, but I have never in my life read a book where I'm listening to the audiobook and I'm like, don't do it. Like, please don't do it. Knowing that, like, because of the course of the story, it has to happen. Kathleen signed this, and she was just like, I don't know how to feel. Like, I'm glad you loved it. Like, I want you to read more. And I do. I have another book by her, A Girl in Pieces is another book I have by her. But all of her books deal, I think, in some capacity, quote me if I'm wrong here, or correct me if I'm wrong, I think they deal with addiction and substance abuse. So I have to mentally prepare myself before I jump to it. But I really, really did love this one. The next one that I have on this list is going to be The Wicked Ones. Now, I was very surprised by this. I knew that the Dark Ascension series was a thing that Disney did, and I got more clued into the series because the book about Jafar came out this past year. I am a retelling junkie. Like, if it's a retelling, you can go ahead and sign me up. I was ruined for Disney when I read Katie Robert, so it's fine at this point. You can't get worse than that. And these are villain origin stories. So this one is Cinderella, but we're learning why the evil stepsisters became the evil stepsisters and why Lady Tremaine is Lady Tremaine. When I tell y'all this book is sad, I literally feel like a lot of villain origin stories that we know of from like Disney, it's unfortunate circumstances that make these people the way that they are. And so these two girls start off like not being like horrible, but circumstances make them into these people, and Cinderella happens to be, she's the catalyst for a lot of it, and so a lot of the blame gets placed on her. I've read Robin Benway before, so this is great writing, but I mean, goodness gracious, it made me so excited to read The Lost Ones. I think Lauren DeStefano did The Lost Ones, which is Captain Hook's origin story, and like I said, Hasfa Faisal did Jafar's origin story. I don't know if they're going to do any more, but if they're all set up like this, I'm bound to kind of enjoy them. And I'm glad that they got new covers, because I don't think the old covers were well done. And these ones visually just, I think, have more opportunity to grab an audience in. The next one that I have on this list is A Language of Dragons by S.F. Williamson. This was the other dragon book that I read this year that I loved. I love this book so much. The sequel to this book literally just came out. I have it on audio, but then I decided I'm going to reread this book before I read the sequel. And I also made sure I got the Fairy Loot edition of the sequel to match this, because I enjoy the series that much. This is a fantasy, but it is also historical. It takes place in between World War I and World War II, 1923, which is why I'm so confused that every time I see a review and people are like, oh, this is World War II. I need everyone to get their like dates right? Like, World War I happened prior to to the 1920s, right? World War II happens after the 1920s. And I think that that will help us have a better understanding of how this book is not a reimagining of World War I or World War II. It's not. It's 1923. But it does follow a system where humans are divided into 3 classes, and you can academically test, I guess, to move up a class. So we're following a main character who is on her way on the up and up. How she got there is quite unfortunate, and she is put on a special mission after her entire family gets caught up in things that she didn't think that they were a part of. She ends up trying to retaliate and sets off pretty much a whole war by accident with the dragons. And she's made a deal that she will work at Bletchley Park, which I think is what's confusing people, because Bletchley Park is a real place that definitely plays a big role in World War II. But she's there to help decode. Now, what's interesting is a linguist wrote this book, and a huge part of this book is language and its use for propaganda. And I think people, when they were reviewing this book, like, they missed that point. It is a great lesson in how language can be weaponized, how lack of access to language can be weaponized. And so these dragons have a way of communicating that is almost similar to how we view a dialect, right? I think about this in the way that we talk about African American Vernacular English, AAVE. There are just some things in a dialect that you just can't translate. There's more meaning to it than any definition than someone could give you. And what she's doing is she's hearing these different sounds that the dragons are making, and it's her job to decipher these communications and to help them win the war. As you read this book, you learn so much more, so many things unfold. It's a lot of twists and turns. I think another criticism that I saw of this book is that she's dumb, she's stupid, she doesn't make right decisions. Mind you, this character is about 16, 17 in this book. That means her frontal lobe is not developed. Your frontal lobe isn't finished cooking until your mid-20s. And so your ability to make decisions, which is your frontal lobe, that is the decision-making area of your brain, is not developed as a teenager. You're supposed to do stupid things because it's developmentally appropriate, which is why I get so frustrated when adults read teen books and they expect teenagers to act like adults. If you want adults, read adult fantasy. If you're going to read a teen fantasy, don't expect adult-like behavior. And so we also have to take into consideration, this is a main character who lives in a society where she's been conditioned to believe that the only way to function in this society is to move through the classes. She doesn't know anything different. And so we are literally watching her deconstruct. Deconstruction does not take place overnight. You don't wake up and say, oh my God, revelation, I'm done. You have to unlearn everything that you've been taught from a young age. She literally had it beat into her by her own father. So there's no way that any decision that she made in this book was going to make 100% sense. I think that S.F. Williamson took the skills that she has as a linguist, applied it to this book, reminded us of the society that we all live in, which is why I'm mind blown, because I feel like the whole point of this is to reveal how we as humans right now are functioning, and how we allow language to dictate everything that we do, and how it is used against us. It was just brilliant. I could do an entire review on this book. I won't, because I've already talked about it enough, but I will be reading the sequel. I will be reading this book. Highly, highly, highly recommend it. Fairy Loot did some really, really pretty editions of this. You can't get your hands on it now, except for people who are trying to sell it at an extremely ridiculous price, but it is what it is. My runner-ups, honorable mentions for YA. First one we have is Death in the Jungle. This is the nonfiction book that I read about Jonestown. This was very, very well done, very, very tactful. I learned a lot. It's stuff that some of the stuff I already knew about Jonestown. I think Jonestown is one of the more popular groups that's spoken about when we talk about cults, but also just the way there was conversations about its impact on popular culture. What does it mean to be a part of a cult? How do people get sucked into being part of a cult? I did not realize like the work that he did in order to draw in a lot of people that were Black. I had no idea like how he presented himself and the things that he was saying in order to draw in specific people from the Black community. It was just a very fascinating read. Interviews were done. It was handled with a lot of grace and care. Highly, highly recommend that nonfiction book if you have not picked it up. And then also What the Woods Took. This one it's my first Courtney Gould book. I don't know if it's Gould or Gould. It's survivalist horror is the best way that I know how to phrase it. We have these kids who are essentially kidnapped that are sent to a reformed woods program. But when they get into the woods, there's an entity that's out there that might be doing some body snatching. Who knows? I think while there are horrific elements like fantastical or supernatural horrific elements, the true horror lies in whether you want to deal with the issues in your life or whether you want to avoid them and give up. And that's a confrontation that each one of the characters has to go through. Do I want to deal with what is waiting for me at home? Do I want to battle those demons, or would I rather just turn away from it? Which I thought was an interesting parallel that she did, which made me want to read more of Courtney's books, but definitely an honorable mention of that. Moving on to the next section, we have our graphic novels. First one on the list, definitely one of my best books of 2025, Silence Voices. This is about the Guatemalan genocide. I knew nothing about it. When it said Guatemalan genocide, I said, huh? I had no idea that there was a Guatemalan genocide. It follows a young boy who is doing some work for class, and his teacher said, oh, well, I see they're having trials in relationship to the Guatemalan genocide. And he was like, how is your family handling that? Because I know they're from Guatemala. And he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So he goes home to ask his mom, hey, what is this thing that I'm hearing about a Guatemalan genocide? And she's like, she flies off the handle. And I'm not talking about that I don't. Eventually, we come to find out that she herself survived the genocide, and she lost a lot of people in relationship to the genocide, and she does not like to talk about it. And so we get the graphic novel in two perspectives, where it's his timeline with his mother telling the story, and a timeline where his mother is telling her story. And it's beautifully done. It's heartbreaking. And then I went on like a deep dive of like reading information about the genocide, and I always think about the things like that we in the Western part of the world, like things that we don't learn about other areas of the globe, and it's amazing what we don't know. The second one that I have is Hikaru and the Light. Love this middle grade. If you have kiddos that love K-pop demon hunters and are interested in idol related things, this is not fantasy, but it is about a young girl who wants to be an idol. She can sing, but she's nervous about it because she doesn't have the traditional like idol look, and her friend convinces her like, we're going to try out, we're going to be idols together, we're going to make our debut. Of course, all this takes place in Japan. I just thought it was really, really sweet. I am excited to read the second volume, which came out towards the end of last year. And we have The Summer Hikaru Died. This is a horror manga, which, first of all, I didn't know it was a horror manga when I checked it out, because I was like, oh, pretty cover. The Summer Hikaru Died. It's going to be depressing. It's right up my alley. I need to read it. No, it's not. The Summer Hikaru Died is disgusting. It is. I don't even know how to describe it, except we're following a main character who loses his best friend, Hikaru. He goes into the mountains, he disappears, and then all of a sudden Hikaru comes back. And his friend is like, you know what? It's good to see you, but I know for a fact that you're not Hikaru. And the thing that is Hikaru is like, how do you know? Like, how did you figure it out? And I'm like, so reading that in the first volume, I was like, what the fuck? And it just gets progressively worse. I can read it. I don't think I'll ever be able to watch the anime. I think it would scare me shitless because I think the manga kind of did at some point. Like, I actively did not read that one at night for a plethora of reasons. I need to read volume 5. It came out, or maybe volume 6 came out while I was reading the series, because I read this for 30 and 30 in September. I need to read volume 5, and I think volume 6 should be out, so I need to catch up on that series. I also read Morgana and Oz. This is a webtoons graphic novel that is really cute. It's great for a teen audience. It's a kind of like paranormal romance where we have witches and vampires that are kind of going at it. And the vampires think that the witches tried to harm them, and then the witches are like, we would never, that's not us, we wouldn't do it. And so Morgana and Oz have kind of found themselves working together, and there is a slight romance that is developing between the two of them. It's really cute, really charming, perfect for the spooky season. And the last one that we have on my official 5 is Your Lie in April. Child, I read all 11 volumes of Your Lie in April in 2025, and I will never read that series again. It is one of the best manga series I've ever read, but it is the most depressing thing I've ever. I could not even finish the anime because if I read it and I cried, I have a clip in a vlog that I did, and I'm like snot, drooling, puffy eyed. It was a mess. I should have. I've been reading Your Lie in April for years, y'all, because it was available on KU. I read volume 1 probably 3 or 4 times, and I said, at this point, I'm going to continue the series. Yeah, I continued the series, and I made the mistake of listening to the music. So it follows a main character who, he used to be like a piano prodigy, and his mother was extremely abusive, and it got to the point that he was so traumatized that whenever he played the piano, he could no longer hear the music. So he couldn't, like, he would press keys and he couldn't hear anything. Clearly a trauma response. Then he meets this girl who plays the violin, and she's like, you're going to play the piano again. He's like, well, I can't read the music. I can't hear the music. She's like, it doesn't matter. You're going to play the violin. I mean, you're going to play the piano again. And he does. And I made the mistake of, especially in those later volumes, listening to the classical music that they were playing while I was reading it. Boy, I cried and I cried and I cried and I cried. I was going to buy the 2-in-1 editions that they were republishing because I loved it so much. And then I got to that final volume and I said, yeah, I'm not doing it because I will never reread this again. I started watching the anime and I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to finish this anime. I'm not going to finish it. I can't, because it destroyed me. And I mean, that's the mark of a good series. But yeah, no, absolutely not. I don't even know if I can recommend it in good faith. My honorable mentions, of course, Remarried Empress, The Remarried Empress. That's a series that I've continued. I've talked about a lot. It's a manhwa. I'm trying to read more manhwa in 2025. I love this series so much just because of the political intrigue, the court intrigue that comes with it. And I think the Empress is badass. Like, you're not going to get a mistress on her. Get your mistress pregnant and then tell her that she has to be okay with it until after the baby's born. No, she's going to divorce you and she's going to get remarried. And that's not a spoiler because you learn first page of the first volume, she is requesting to get remarried, but you just find out why. And it has to do with the emperor who she loved and adored. They've known each other since they were kids. They were betrothed as kids, and he kind of does a 180 on her, and she's supposed to be okay with it, and she's not okay with it. Like the badass queen that she is, she shouldn't be okay with it, and she gets her clap back. The second runner-up that I have is The Other Side of Tomorrow. This is a middle grade graphic novel that details the experience of 2 kids living in North Korea as they try to escape. Boy, oh boy, Tina Cho did her thing with this graphic novel. I know very little about North Korea. Enough to get me by in terms of history, but not enough. And I think that this graphic novel did a wonderful job giving that insight to what it would be like to be a kid growing up in North Korea, and how dangerous it is to try to leave that country, and how you can't literally cross into South Korea. You have to go around in order to make it to South Korea in hopes of getting to the US embassy to seek asylum and to get to the States. The artwork was well done. The storytelling was well done. That is one that I think I will actively revisit at some point. All right, and the last section that we have is the adult section. I typically don't do this, but we're going to start doing it this year because I do want to talk a little bit more about the adult content that I am reading. The first one that we have on the list is one that I did not expect. This was not a perfect book for me, but I keep thinking about this book. And this book helped me determine what I like in quote unquote romantasy. I personally think that there is a difference between romantasy and fantasy romance, and I think I cling more to fantasy romance than romantasy. And this was a book that helped me make that decision. I also read this book when I had the flu, so it holds a special place in my heart. This is a massive chunk of a book. I think, this may not have been the longest book that I read last year, but this version I think is close to 600. The indie published version was close to 800, so I don't know why, like the page count maybe, but the text is incredibly small. This is one that I think people have an issue with because the world building is extremely intricate. This is one where the romance is there, but it's slow burning, and it is definitely something that we are getting ourselves to, right? It's not the sole focus of the book. And I realize that if I'm going to have fantasy and romance together, I need the fantasy to be present. It can't just be a backdrop where it's just there to exist. I need to know specific details about magic systems, how things have worked. Like in this book specifically, there are literally dragons that have turned into moons that are in the sky. Then there are dragons that have fallen out of the sky and they don't know why it's happening. We are following an assassin who may or may not have an identity that she is not aware of. We're also following this guy. It's hard to talk about this book without, because I'm like, what can I tell you about this book without giving spoilers? She's on a journey of self-discovery. She's on a journey of self-discovery, and boy, does this book have twists and turns to it that I did not see coming, especially the end. The end of this book, I don't understand. And then the sequel was supposed to come out last year. Do we realize the sequel did not come out last year? The sequel to this book is not coming out until this year, I think. And I think that Sarah A. Parker said that when you read the sequel, you will understand. How did she phrase it? When you read the sequel, you'll see that she planned out everything in the beginning. Everything will fall into place and it will make sense. This is one of those books where I say just trust the process, because when you go into it initially, it's going to be super confusing, but just trust it. And this is coming from someone who's not the strongest fantasy reader, and I enjoyed this book well enough. I do need to reread it before I pick up the sequel at some point this year. The book that we have is The Kingdom, the Power, and the Glory by Tim Alberta. This was one of the only adult nonfiction books I read last year. This is for my history, social side, political side people who love anything about the intersection of religion and politics and how messy that is. And it literally talks about the rise of Christian nationalism in the United States and its ties to evangelicalism and how that has now married itself into party politics and the dangers in that. And this is coming from a writer who is very involved and had been very involved in the church and started to question some things about what was happening. and why politics became the center of the church, especially in the South, and why we are where we are right now. I think that the confusion about specifically Christianity and the role that it's playing in the United States right now, the questions that a lot of people have, I think Tim does an excellent job answering those questions. This is one that I would go back, like I would revisit this one. And I don't say that very often about adult nonfiction. Usually I'm one and done and I'm good. But this is one that I would go back to because even after reading that, why? But he lays out how like things happen. Interesting things. Like, I did not know that the right was only concerned with abortion starting in like the 80s, and that was attached to the insertion of Christianity into that part of the political spectrum. So stuff like that will give you greater context for what's happening right now. But really, really good. I really enjoyed it. I did give it 5 stars when I read it. The next one that I have is Phantasma. Y'all, I didn't think that I would like horror and romance mashed together, but then I read Phantasma. And I know Phantasma is usually recommended as a dark romance, but honey, that book is horror. I don't care. The scenes in that book, straight horror. Very gruesome, very dark. But there were moments where I was like, ooh, I'm questioning why I'm enjoying said book. But it was a great combination of horror and romance and one. You over there snoring. Go upstairs and go to bed.
Don't you bully me? Bully me on camera.
It was a great combination of horror and romance in a way that I did not expect it. I know that Enchantra is not as good as Phantasma, so I've heard it's not as good as Phantasma, but the fact that we are following a main character who's entering this game, almost like this carnival-esque, trying to rescue her sister, and she has to complete these levels that are very similar to like Dante's Inferno. I think it was well written, it was well paced. I had a little bit of technical issues, but the reveal at the end blew me away, and that was enough to make me immediately put Enchantra on hold, and I will be reading that one this year. The last one that I have on my adult list is going to be Guild by Raven Kennedy. I did decide to start the Plated Prisoner series this year. Another one that I'm blown away by, and one that really leans itself heavy on the fantasy side. And it leans itself heavy on the fantasy side. I would check out the content warnings attached to this. This is a Midas retelling where our main character is literally made of gold. And she is Midas's, it's not a relationship between the two. He keeps her locked up. And the opening scene to this book was like, oh my God, it was a lot. But I think that it is storytelling well done. And there were some reveals at the end of this one too that immediately made me go and pick up Glint, which is the second book in the series. I know people have mixed opinions on it, but when I read it, I did enjoy it. I do think that the storytelling is well done. I think this is another one that has that court intrigue, political intrigue to it that I enjoy. Fantasy for me, when it has people betraying other people, and everybody's calculated and you don't know who to trust, and the person that you thought you could trust is not the person that you really should trust, and everybody stabs everybody in the back, that's me. Sign me up. That's the type of stuff that I like. And that's what Guild is. No one's to be trusted. You can't trust anybody. Everybody has a motive, and everybody's out for their own personal revenge. This one is also kind of gory, but once again, I enjoyed it. All All right, y'all, that is it. Those are my favorite books of 2025. Let me know down in the comments below what books you read in 2025 that ended up being your favorites. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications. If you're looking for ways to support the channel, all the links will be down in the description box below, as well as ways to follow me on social media. As always, I will be back with another video soon. Bye.